Good morning, everybody. I'm Judy Gibbs, and I'm the Director of Skills at the Worcestershire Local Enterprise Partnership. I'm going to say it's very nice to sit on this panel today with a number of people that I know very well. But just to introduce them along the way, we have Derwin Kent here, who's from the Development Manager, Joanne Murphy, and then at the end, Richard Wilkinson, who are from the University of Worcester, and then Costa Lovato and his colleague who is online, Stefan, who are from Carter Development. So before we move on to kind of some questions and having a chat about this, those of you that know me will know that this is an area I'm really passionate about. I'm really passionate about young people and their journey into the workforce. And it's something that we as the Local Enterprise Partnership have been working on for a number of years. My role in the Local Enterprise Partnership is to look at what skills do employers need now and in the future, and how do we as a system, so higher education, further education, training providers, schools, Department for Work and Pensions, etc., get those needs met, essentially. How do we work to reduce that skills gap that we know is already there? It sounds really simple, but unfortunately it's not, for a number of reasons, not least all the external factors and government policy and, the impact of major pandemics and other factors. So alongside that strategy and setting that strategy for the county and working with those partners, my remit also, we roll out a number of programmes for the county, and sometimes that might be that we're doing that entirely on our own, but the majority of the time is about us working in partnership. So we work with organisations in partnership to deliver the outcomes that are required for our employers and for our young people. So just to give you a bit of an oversight of some of those, and particularly around the young people piece, as I said, I'm really passionate about this, and that's definitely reflected in the work that we have. So one of the pieces of work that we do is all about inspiring Worcestershire's future workforce. So it's all about creating that future workforce for employers. So very much working with young people in our Worcestershire schools, year 7 and upwards, and supporting them to understand the needs of employers moving forward and to prepare them to be ready for the world of work. Alongside that, we also have a programme operating actually really close out of the Hive in Worcester and soon to be all around the county, where we actually support young people that find themselves needing support, help and advice. And that could be because actually they're out of work, but it could also be because they're in college or they're in university or at school and they actually want support to think through their next steps, their transition, whatever that might be. Wider than that, we have programmes looking at inclusive needs, because what we know is that a lot of our young people, if they have additional needs, actually the sort of transition for them in terms of employment but also into education is much harder than it is for their peers. Really passionate about apprenticeships as well. So 10 years ago, Worcestershire started a brand called Worcestershire Apprenticeships and set up to advise and guide employers and young people and individuals in the workforce around apprenticeships, how to access them, how to get funding for them, how to understand them, what are they, all the questions. And then more recently, over the last few years, it's been about how do we support individuals that actually want to upskill, want to reskill, want to go into the workforce, but want to transition really quickly through a programme called the Department for Education Boot Camps. So that's quite a nice segue actually into Derwin, who is our sort of first panellist with some questions. So Derwin and I have known each other for a very long time, and we've worked together for many, many years. And the Development Manager are predominantly an apprenticeship organisation. They predominantly deliver apprenticeships in digital. So obviously thinking about the whole challenge around employers and their needs, how does TDM ensure that programmes are designed to both meet the educational outcomes that students need, so the government piece, but also the skills requirements that they need to go into industry?
Okay, so in response to that, I'm going to talk about how we deliver, because I think that's not all apprenticeship providers are the same. And so when I read the question, it's kind of interpreted as how TDM deliver. So I'll talk about TDM's approach and also what we deliver and why that's important at this point in history. So in terms of how we deliver, The first thing is we're not actually necessary, to be honest. If an employer takes on a member of staff and says, go and become a data analyst, they can go and access pretty much everything they need fairly cheaply online. They can study by themselves and they can apply it in the workplace and learn from making their own mistakes. And we're not necessary, so we can all go for a coffee. The point is, we call the development manager for a reason. We can stretch and challenge that process, structure it, and make sure that there's sufficient depth in study and sufficient breadth in the studies that people do to make sure they learn a broader understanding of the trade in more detail. And we can continuously assess and go through a continuous coaching process where we plan learning ahead, assess that that's happened, teach into gaps, and then align workplace needs with the learning needs. Does that make sense? So we call the development manager because we're in there on a coaching process. Recent employer we've won the trust of is Microsoft themselves. So very proud to be working with Microsoft. But the reason, if you go on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see a conversation that's happening. And the reason Microsoft have chosen us is because a lot of the apprenticeship providers that they're working with deliver what Becky Smith from Microsoft calls a course-first apprenticeship, as opposed to a skills-first apprenticeship. So she says it's course-first apprenticeship, skills-first apprenticeship. For me, the distinction is simply it's an apprenticeship versus a course. And I think what a lot of our organisations are doing is they're drawing down government money to deliver a course. They're not delivering an apprenticeship, which is on-the-job learning, tailored and negotiated with that employer organisation. So that's how we deliver. The second thing that's different about us is we send in two types of coach. The first one is for skills and knowledge, which are obviously related to the technical trades. And the second one is for performance improvement. So we all talk about soft skills, but really what this manifests as is being a more effective contributor at work. So the second type of coach does performance improvement, and they do whole person development as well, turning somebody into a better member of society. So that's how we deliver. What we deliver is also important. So two things. Number one, we go from beginner boot camp right up to a BSc degree in the trades, and we do tech. We do all the tech, cyber, data. Do you see what I mean? People say, oh, your niche is just tech and digital. It doesn't feel very niche. It's a pretty broad sector, to be brutally honest. Feels broad enough. But we are working in that breadth of very technical skills. The next thing is, obviously, Worcestershire is a very lucky county in that we've got a lot of very, very good technology-oriented companies, tech specialists and tech-savvy employers, do you see what I mean, who are really strong. So obviously we're here to serve them. But there's also a long tail of employers that are not tech-savvy, and we understand that that's our duty as well. Who remembers 1992? Do you remember computing in those days?
Yeah, sure.
Right, Microsoft Word had not yet been invented. Microsoft Excel had not yet been invented. And Microsoft came out with a raft of technologies that changed the way we work and the way we think about work in every job. That's happening again. Go and have a look at Power Platform. There's a set of technologies that normal human beings are going to be using at work. And these technologies are Power Pages to make web pages, Power Apps, Power Automate, which does creates bots to automate boring processes. Power Intelligent Agent that turns those bots into chatbots. And Power BI, which is data capture, data representation, data communication, which it will still need Excel, but it's bigger than Excel. Those technologies are going to be used by workers in every office, in every department. People will be able to use them. So it's our job to help people understand those as well.
Thank you, Darren. And quite clearly, I think it's worth knowing that digital apprenticeships, or all things that we kind of consider under digital in Worcestershire, have been growing, not surprisingly, for the last 5 years or so. And we do find ourselves definitely at a bit of a turning point, I think, with our organisations who are realising that actually it's really hard to buy in digital skills. It's really, frankly, it can be very expensive. So I think it's really great that we have you in the county to support us with that. However, we know there's a number of challenges when it comes to apprenticeships. And, Rishi announced a couple of days ago, nice and helpfully, a number of new support programs for smaller businesses. But tell us about those challenges. What do you think are the most significant challenges? And I know one of those is about actually finding an apprentice to suit the business. And what solutions do you have at TDM for those?
Okay, so do you remember I said about that big steep group of tech-savvy companies and tech specialist companies? They'll employ technologists. So the way it works is you get technicians who are career entry people, technologists who are really quite deep-end technical people, and then you get technology leaders. So we are definitely keen to support those tech-savvy companies with their technologists. But the other companies, we actually want the other companies to use the local technology companies. Do you see what I mean? And we actually want to refer them in and say, you need these guys. But those local organisations also need, the less tech-savvy ones, need their technology leader in order to think business and speak to the technologists. That's why they need the degree apprenticeship. And they also need technicians to do everyday tasks, which is so that they can support the duties of the technologists who are more niche. Challenges we're facing... I'll just give a little list of things, really. So first of all, for recruits and then for reskillers. So the first one, everybody's complaining about the bureaucracy on sign-up. And it's a pain in the neck. So the amount of bureaucracy that's involved. Now, hopefully Sunak addresses this with the change that comes through. But what happens is we help as much as we can, but there are certain things that only the employer can uncover, sort of information about their own business. And what happens is they sit on it for a while and then they lose the apprentice because the apprentice goes to someone else. So that would be nice to get that bureaucratically more efficient, but let's see if that happens. The other one, I won't go into that one. Making them stay. So lots of employers talk about the issue with apprentices is they train them up, they get them embedded, and then they move on and don't stay. I can say from our organisation, from the completers, 90% stay. And so we work very, very hard on the idea that there's kind of an agreement to fulfil the apprenticeship, and then there's a kind of payback period with the employer afterwards. And also we're asking the employer to think about, I think talent and experience these days is about the long-term journey, the stretch and the challenge, so progressing from level to level as a journey. So sign them up as a technician, turn them into a technologist or at least a technology leader. Do you see what I mean? And give them that long-term plan with the organisation. So those are the kind of conversations we're addressing there. The other problem we face with employers is employers think that solving their technology issue in their company is equivalent to hunting for a unicorn. So they think they're out to find one magical person who's going to resolve all the technical issues. It's not actually going to get resolved that way. In Warwickshire, you can go and sift in sand next to riverbanks for little stars. It's little stars, fossils in the shape of stars, and you can sift out the grit and the sand and find these little stars. And I think developing the technology future of an organisation is working with the currently employed in a process of sifting for stars, not hunting for a unicorn. So put them through learning programs, boot camps and apprenticeships, and get people, because you'll find the skill set is in your organisation all over the place, but we just need to pull it out. So that's the challenges we face.
Thank you, Darren. In terms of, just quickly for me, future trends. So what do you think the future trends are in terms of digital apprenticeships? Where do you think it's going to
go? I'll break that down into approaches to employment and approaches to learning delivery, basically. So approaches to employment, digital transformation in any organisation needs to be a continuous agenda. It needs to be discussed at board level, it needs to be strategic, and we want as an organisation to be part of that conversation. The other thing is for employers, the talent experience concept. So people have changed in their attitudes to work. They used to care about their job and the satisfaction and the pay slip. Nowadays, people are more driven by purpose. They want meaning. They want to feel they're contributing. They want to feel they're part of a conversation. They want to feel that they're learning. And so if an organisation isn't thinking about that, they're going to struggle because their people will leave because people want much more than just a pay slip nowadays. The next point is how learning is going to change. I was speaking to Joe earlier. With the arrival of generative AI, that's become a really interesting resource for us. So in the past, like the days of course first apprenticeships have gone, guys, because you can get courses on the internet. So content coverage or acquisition of content is less exciting than the conversation around the application of knowledge in the workplace. That's where the real value lies. Do you see what I mean? So in that context, generative AI is amazing, because instead of typing in a search term and getting a video monologue, you type in a search term and you get a conversation. And that becomes a dialogue where they give you, ask a question, it answers, and they say, no, you misunderstood, I need more around this, and it gives you that. And it becomes a gradually honing dialogue. That's amazingly contributory for us as a training provider organisation, because that knowledge is we can put it onto the learner to bring the conversation to us. Do you see what I mean? So it changes the way we work. Assessment, it challenges on things like essay as an assessment. You can't really use that anymore. You can use time invigilated essay, but e-portfolio is the solution, because it's like the application of workplace in practice. So it's becoming it's more fun for us as educators as the technology improves, basically.
Thank you. And I think, that is one of the real benefits of apprenticeships, isn't it? That actually they're able to take that learning and apply that really quickly and make a difference to your business. And I'm incredibly passionate about it, and actually have two of my staff in the room who've both completed a development manager apprenticeship at degree level and level 3. So thank you. So moving on, we're going to talk to Costa and Stephen. Stefan, I'm never sure how it's going to work when they're online, but we'll give it our best go. So we know that there's a disconnect, and if I had £1 for every person that tells me this, I'd be very rich by now, between employer expectations and young people. And I think it is very much that. But I know, Stefan and Costa, you've kind of been working to develop a platform to support young people to specifically address this gap. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'll let Stefan take that question first.
Yeah. So basically what happens, I think it was said, is that employers, they for them, an entry-level position, a student applying is basically a liability. They don't really know if they can trust you with the job, and also they need to train you, right? And this is where we found that our platform is the most helpful. So entry-level software engineer, it's around 40K a year. Usually it takes around 2 years to say that, yeah, now this engineer is good to go. It's going to make a return on my investment. And this is ridiculous. We're already paying 30K for a degree in computer science. And yeah, this is way too much money. So what we figured out is students have a lot of time on their hands, and they could actually utilize this time to become more employable. And an employer, what they care about is, can you be trusted? And can you do a basic task? Can you work in a team? Can you work in a company setting, right? And so for us, the best way we found to solve this problem is to say, you're a student. There's a lot of small businesses around that need help, need technical help. Just go on and solve problems for them, right? And so when you do this, and I'm the first experiment of our idea, I studied physics, and I had basically no issue finding software engineering internships. They didn't care about my personal projects, my grades, how smart I was, whatever. They cared about this small freelancing I was doing on the side, because they were all right, this person can generate economic value with their skills. And so when you do this for a company, when you present yourself as a student for an entry-level position, and you've already been paid by small companies, it doesn't matter, to perform something, what they see is, all right, I don't need to spend that much money training this person. So this is where the economic value is created, because it's kind of like a labor arbitrage. You take students who should be fit for a job but are not fit for the job, and you make them fit for a job. So yeah, this is kind of how we close this massive gap, because it is there. Everyone is losing their minds at the moment. We have computer science students coming to us on social media being it's so complicated these days. Companies don't want to hire like entry level. They don't have entry level positions anymore. It's because of this.
Thank you, Stefan. So employer engagement then. So you're obviously having to engage employers to get them on board for the platform. Tell us about how you're doing that.
Well, it depends what kind of employer we're working with. So I'll start by setting out the scene, which is we've worked with small enterprises, so startups. We've worked with mid-sized enterprises, and we have worked with one large enterprise. And the difference between a middle enterprise and a large enterprise and a small one is different due to the liabilities which they see and kind of the gaps in which we've had to fill as a company. So first and foremost, with startups, what we've seen is an inability to be able to pay salaries and an inability to really be able to prove that their idea will work in the long term and therefore attract student talent. And so the way in which we've worked with this as Carter is we have identified that we at our university and at other universities around the country have students who work in tech or in computer science who have facilities that they can bring to these startups on a contract which is short term. So this not only allows startups to be able to utilize their capital effectively by not having to really provide, for example, 30, 40,000 pounds, but they can do so to the amount which they require. And it also provides students with first-hand work experience during their time at university, which then provides them with an ability to speak to potentially a larger employer within an interview about how they are professional first and foremost, but more importantly, how they have the skills to be able to apply themselves to an internship or to a full-time job. And it means that those small businesses themselves are able to have people who are cheap and yet very effective. And so that is kind of the startup scene, and it's meant that we have been successful completing around 10 projects to date with various startups and providing them kind of with that first launch pad to be able to then grow and become a full-fledged business. With regards to medium-sized enterprise, the main issue for them, which we have seen, is an ability to compete with larger businesses and to advertise themselves effectively. And the way in which we have operated there is we have utilized our social media presence to be able to advertise their roles to a wider range of students. This not only means that they themselves as businesses have access to higher caliber students, but it also means that students who may not necessarily be from your standard high-end university have an opportunity to actually present themselves to other employers, both within the Midlands, but also around the UK. And finally, something which we have been working on, not to the great success with startups and with medium-sized enterprises, is really working with those larger companies. And so the issue that we have seen with large companies is that they have so much money and so much capital that they often invest it in an unwise manner or in a manner which is economically inefficient. And the main way in which they do so is through recruiters. Now, from what we've seen, for example, if you have a £35,000 job, a recruiter, when they bring in a new student, will take around £7,000. And the issue there is that then the company gets a student who may or may not be qualified for the job. They have to pay an extra fee of £7,000, and then they have to train that student up to the necessary standard. And so what we saw was there is an ability to take those £7,000 and do something like, for example, the development manager does, which is to provide a skills session or a skills course throughout the year in tandem with the company itself for all students who will then go on to work as full-time employees. So not only do you limit the time frame of introduction within the workforce by being able to have it prior to the employee's entry within the company, but you also provide students with an ability to upskill themselves. And what we have seen is that if you manage to create a program correctly, in the future years, you are then able to pay the students themselves for that upskilling. And so what you bring there is an ability to provide more students with opportunities. So a student no longer, for example, has to have a part-time job. They can have a job with that company in the future, but they can also be paid to upskill themselves before working full-time. And ultimately, that is what Stefan and I are passionate about as working with Carter, is obviously providing students with an opportunity to be able to engage with employees in a way which will render them more employable, which will render them employable not only from the perspective of their own skills, but because we believe in the students so much, it's also an ability to render themselves employable with regards to professionalism and how they interact with employees and how they then enter workplaces. And that's something which has to be done on all fronts. but it can be done effectively, and we have seen various success. And what we're really looking forward to is kind of opening up the workforce to students, from all universities, regardless of where they're from, and to all types of companies, because ultimately some students may be better suited to another type of company, but may not have the opportunities due to the limitations I spoke of previously.
I can see the benefits. Like, it's a great try before you buy almost, isn't it, as well? And I imagine not only is it great for that student in terms of the experience that they're getting, and Darren and I have had many conversations about this as a challenge in terms of even entering apprenticeships needing some real life experience. But also I can see the flip of that, which is that, the employer's brand is being raised. So the employer themselves actually are able to then kind of get a wider audience of students, especially if you're small and medium, that would then look at you as a company and understand you. So really great. How do you ensure that student match with the employer? How do you ensure that the employer gets the right student?
Well, so at the inception, what we had was we were 4 students. So it was myself, Stefan, and 2 other students from the University of Birmingham. And the way in which we started off was providing our own skills. So the 3 students were computer science students, along with Stefan, and building a reputation for being able to provide quality software services, and kind of building our name in tandem with our university's incubator, which is called Elevate. And that first step was important to us afterwards, because it allowed us to basically provide our name and our own quality and references to the platform in which we now provide. And so what that has meant is that within interview processes with companies for a potential job, we have been able to showcase not only our prior resumes, but also provide them with the resumes of all the students. And so then it comes to us to recruit students effectively and to really understand where their skills lie. Obviously, it's a difficult process, but we have been able to utilize social media to reach out to students from all over the country. So not only within the Midlands, which is our focus area, but also, for example, in the South and in the North. And it has meant that by being able to interview each student individually, something we have done for every single student which we have employed and provided to their companies, we've been able to understand what their prior experience is. And furthermore, the important thing about us is that we so far have only hired students in their 3rd year or in their master's year. So that has allowed them first and foremost to gain some prior work experience, or showcase, for example, a portfolio, which they can then use to advertise themselves to potential employers through our platform, Carter. And I know Stefan may want to speak a bit more about our other platform, which is called Coffee Chat, which we've developed and released in the past week, which speaks more so to providing correct matches between employees and students. So
that's quite a nice segue, actually, because the university obviously is always looking for the best outcomes for its graduates, and absolutely what Stefan and Costa are doing are supporting that, aren't they, in terms of being able to ensure that your young people transition and move on from the university into work. In terms of, as an organisation, as a university, you are very much focused on that, trying to ensure that pace of technological advancement and having the right curriculum against that. So can you tell us, how the University of Worcester tries to respond to the curriculum need of employers and equip graduates with those future skills?
I'll just mention one thing and then I'll let Richard talk about the curriculum. Just as a quick aside, so my role within the business school, which is business and computing students, I do the external engagement and I run external programs, so executive education programs. Also within my team, I run placements and internships, which I see as a huge key part of preparing our graduates for work. We often, our computing students are encouraged to do a 12-month placement into an organisation, and from that and the success of that programme, and they'll go to large employers as well. We do also encourage them to look where companies will have them locally. So that placement year for me is absolutely key in producing that work-ready graduate. Rich and I share a passion in that area and believe that all of our students should do that. Again, back to that sort of similar conversation, local employers are in competition with large. For example, we have a student at EA Games this year. They absolutely great. We have them going to Google. We had them at Unisys last year. We do find that with the students. I'm a computer science graduate myself. I was very brand orientated as I went through university. So in terms of what I'm seeing, I can see those roles coming in, the placement roles. So that is something then that I can feed into the curriculum. We also have lots of opportunities that I create in the business school, such as careers fairs attended by SMEs. We have computing showcases. So we have a lot of local businesses that come and engage with us, support us with the students. So that's also a thing. I have an employer board. So that meets a couple of times a year at the university, and I have a select sort of different members, different organisations and companies that will come and feed into the design. And then I'm going to pass over to Richard now, because from a curriculum perspective, he can describe to you what that portfolio of courses looks like and what goes within those courses.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks, Judy. I think when it comes to the curriculum, we're sort of walking a bit of a tightrope when it comes to the curriculum, in terms of student expectation when they start and our expectation of what we want to produce when they finish. We've got some students in the room at the moment, and what we often see with our students that come into us is students who love coding, like to build games, like to do technical things, want to know about, love cybersecurity, and they come to us with this idea: I want to do more of that technical stuff. But what we want to do is change that mindset to make them employable at the end of it. And as our industry panels will tell us, that when they get into the workplace, those particular coding skills with the platform they're going to use, the employers will say, well, we're going to teach you how to do that, because this is what we use, this is how we do it, so we're going to teach you how to do that. And so to a large extent, those technical skills that we're providing are secondary to what we're doing. It's all about preparing our students so that when they go into the workplace, they can be productive members of the workforce. And so whilst some of the students might resist this, we like to do lots of presentations. We like to do lots of group work activities. So actually we're covering a lot of those softer skills to make our employers understand how businesses work, understand project management methodologies, understand how to present to clients or to internally within an organisation. So technically what we teach is very much language agnostic, because we know that the languages that are going to be used in those technical skills are going to change. And so we need those students who can sort of understand how to learn, and so that when they go into the workplace, they are equipped with the skills to be able to say, right, well, I can adapt, I can learn those new skills. A slight aside, because what Darren said made me chuckle inside. My partner has been working for the National Probation Service for many, many years, and she is not a technical person. She's not an IT person, but she's just been on a Power Apps course for 3 days last week, and she's come back to me saying, I've been building apps. I can build apps. And so the advent of things like Power Apps is really levelling the playing field in the technology sector, and opening up to businesses to employ people who have not done computing degrees, because they can be taught, well, I can do Power Automate, I can do these processes, I can use Power BI. And so what we're focusing on is giving our students those skills to be able to learn these new things. We do have regular industry panels, we do talk to the sector. Everybody in this room is more than welcome to get involved. Take my card, get involved. I'm sure Jo will be more than welcome to have everybody on board to contribute to what we're doing, because we want to hear what people need so that we can get our students from that person who just wants to sit in front of a computer and write code to being able to go into the workplace and be that productive member of the workplace, learn those skills that they need within the workplace. And so that's what we do in the curriculum. I don't want to move too far ahead to the next question, but I'm probably teeing it up for you there.
So I was going to ask, actually, one of the things I'm really passionate about is that, all jobs as we move forward will have much more of a digital role within them. So all students from the University of Worcester will need to come out with digital employability, for want of a better explanation. So how are you addressing that at the university to ensure that if you're studying, I don't know, sports, that actually you're coming out and you're still able to utilise the equipment that you may need and understand some of the technology behind that?
So in the past, and certainly when I started at university 8 years ago now, modules had employability skills embedded into those modules. And that was done very much on a piecemeal basis. So depending on what you were studying, those employability skills were different. And you've hit on a really important thing there, because the employability skills in sports might be very different to the employability skills in the business school. And so what the university has done over the last 3 or 4 years now is we've sort of centralised a lot of this and we've created what we call the graduate attributes. And so we've come up with 5 graduate attributes, which are the attributes we want all of our graduates across the university to have, and those are what are embedded into the curriculum. So we've got social responsibility, we've got problem solving, we've got team working. We've also got digital citizenship within that as well. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all students, wherever they come from within the university, have got these graduate attributes embedded in what they're learning. So computing, obviously, which is the department that I head up, digital citizenship sort of runs through everything. Everything they do is very digital. But maybe there's a lot less social responsibility. So we need to do more of that, and we're sort of embedding the UN's SDGs into all of our modules. We're part of the Prime Accord, so that we can bring social responsibility into it. But those team working, those problem solving, that resilience, making students resilient and lifelong learners. Our big task, and this is for the students in the room, is to make sure that our students understand when they leave us, I've learnt how to learn.
Yes.
I've learnt how to be resilient. I didn't always get straight A's, and I've learned how to get back from that. And so those are the skills that we want to embed, make sure that our students have, but crucially make sure they know they've got them. They've learned that they've got those skills, so that when they're going to the workplace and they're asked to learn something new, it's okay, I can do that. I've learned how to do that. So that's what we're doing to embed employability within all of our graduates across the university, not just within the business school.
Fantastic. And that's a common thing that we hear a lot around, young people. But it's not, and I obviously work in the sector, so I know it isn't that we're not doing this work, it's that actually they struggle to articulate
Correct.
it. So when they're presented at an interview, actually they can't articulate an example of team working, but yet when you talk to them and they go, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Yeah. So it's about how we get them to understand that. I'm going to open this last question up a little bit to everybody actually, because I think it provides a good opportunity for the piece that Stefan wants to talk about. But local employers in Worcestershire, we have such a dominance of small companies. It's really hard for them to recruit. It's hard for them to attract that talent. So I suppose 2 sides. What do you all think businesses could do to get themselves in a better place to attract talent, but also from a sort of retention perspective, what do you think they could do to retain?
I run a programme called Springboard, which is a part-time work experience programme. So not all of our students, a 12-month placement is ideal for them. Perhaps they're going to don't want to move away for a year or don't want to take that year out. So it's a way of gaining skills. But the other reason I did it was because the local and regional business economy is full of SMEs. So I wanted to kind of think of ways that we could support that. So that is a way you could employ a student on a work experience basis. I think we've got about 14 on the go at the moment. We got nominated for a National Employability Award for this. I hold a careers fair every year at the business school in October, and I have banned large corporates from that, JLRs, HMRCs. I just have local SMEs. I had 27 in last year. So that's an open invitation to anybody that would like to come and meet them. Get involved as an employer, come and meet the students. I think look at your own recruitment and retention practices. I can tell you now, we do have high levels of neurodiversity on our computing courses. And I can tell you that, EA Games, the big corporates, the big IT, they don't put the students through panel interviews any longer. Their work environments are different. For some of them, they're lolloping around on yellow bean bags, working sort of strange hours. It's having a mind on that. There's lots of stuff you can read about out there, and chamber surveys around salary and benefits. What is it? Sort of get to know a bit who you're employing, and get involved. Whether it's us, whether it's Howe College, Bridget's here. T-levels, work experience opportunities. So I think there's a responsibility of employers to look at themselves, but also engage with us and work with us on this.
So I'm going to ask Stefan, because I know a little bit about Coffee Chat. One of the things I'm really passionate about, and Joe, you mentioned that you are competing for students. So actually some of our more disadvantaged students, actually, what can they do to ensure that they've got, or what can we do to support them? And Stefan, I don't know if this is the point you want to talk about, Coffee Chat.
Right. So basically our goal is to make students more employable. So we've discussed, you can make them work on projects, develop their skills. But I think there is also on the employer side, how you can basically attract more talent. And you can do all sorts of collaborations with the universities, but I think companies should do two things: is build in public on social media. So students are on social media. If I see a company that's sharing on a daily basis, on a regular basis, what they're doing, what's the work like, I would be more invited to apply and to join the company. What we're doing, so we have this software bit, and now we're developing a platform where students can basically book networking calls with people in certain companies. And so the goal here is that students are able to basically get to know the people, network, see what the job is like, also get valuable insights in competitive industries, how can they stand out compared to other people. And so if we have those two dynamics where we train students and help small businesses, and at the same time we take students and we put them in front of employees so they can learn what the industry is like, then you have a synergy which renders students way more employable. They're knowledgeable and they have the skills. What can go wrong, basically? And so, for small businesses, with this question on how they can make themselves more attractive, is just people don't know them. So if I don't know you, I'm not going to apply. And you should build social media following, just show how the day-to-day life is at your company, so people can get to know them, go through student societies. We work with Hustle. It's a startup which is basically this social media platform for student societies. This is a great way to target students directly. And
Thank you. Darren, have you got any points to add to that?
So speaking to employers, and as you go out and speak to employers, tell them to choose I'm obviously speaking within my sort of blinkers, but tell them to choose their apprenticeship provider thoughtfully and carefully. So there's a substantial difference between approaches in apprenticeships providers. What some are doing is they're offering what I would call a thin national provision. So they're essentially saying you go and find your own apprentice or somebody like that and we'll provide the course. Whereas what TDM invest over 33% of our cost into people who are working with schools, employers locally, and working with that small employer market around the area. So we're heavily invested in being a locally responsive training provider. And I think as you're speaking to employers, tell them to say, right, do you want the local? I mean, obviously you've got to look at the quality and you've got to look at the trust. But within that, a parameter is this somebody who's going to work for me locally? And am I encouraging the local economy? And am I forging local relationships? So don't forget, we know all of the employers as well, so we can introduce all the local employers to each other and make recommendations, which that thin national provider can't. And in all sectors, there is a local provider in Worcestershire. So whatever you're going to apprentice somebody in, have a think about that and encourage the local ones.